Ness by Hayden Thorpe. So maybe not a surprise for those of you who follow the channel on YouTube, but this was Karl's pick. Karl, of course, has completed the interview with Hayden, which is very much worth listening to. Includes some of the tracks from the album as well, and you can get a real deep dive on this album, the inspiration for it. You know, even talk of Wild Beast, the time he had there, the different dynamic as a solo artist, and the cheeky question about whether the band will reform at any stage, particularly as that seems to be an ongoing trend at the moment. So do little plug there, but do give that either a listen on Spotify or watch on YouTube. It really is, an hour well worth your time. But anyway, with that, I'll hand over to Karl for what he actually made of the album. I mean, I've read your review in Clash, and there's another plug there. Read that. So, and that gives me the view that it's a very positive association you have with this album.
It is, yeah. I mean, I was gonna start with a plug and a thank you, but you've kind of already done that. So yeah. Like Andrew said, if you haven't already checked it out, we'll stick a link in the description as well, where you can dive into the world of Ness a bit more. But yeah, also just want to quickly, thank Hayden for taking the time to do that interview as well. And yeah, everyone who's watched it so far as well, just really appreciate it. So yeah, on to Ness itself. And yeah, without going into too much background, as it is all on that interview, it's one of those where it's important to give some context to this project, I think, because it does need that to truly appreciate it, I would say. So yeah, this is actually an adaptation of Robert Macfarlane's book of the same name, which explores the site of Orford Ness, which is this coastal nature reserve down in Suffolk. That, as you kind of mentioned at the top of the pod, it was also a military testing site during both World Wars and the Cold War. So the Atomic Weapons Research Establishment, they had a base there, and they conducted all the environmental testing of the nuclear arsenal at that point. However, it was then the Ministry of Defence sold it to the National Trust in 1993, who then left it to rewild, and it's now this place where, nature lives and breathes once again. So, it's a very interesting place, not a place that I knew anything about before, being introduced to this project. But you can see the attraction, what would draw someone to it. It's, this place, you have this collision of, man-made destruction and at the same time natural life. And that is what Robert Macfarlane in his book paints, and in turn Hayden has, beautifully brought to life, I think, on this album. Having now read the book too, I was recently in the US and I read it on the plane, and then I read it while listening to the album while I was on the plane, and it was, seeing the alchemy with which Hayden has picked apart this book and redacted the source material in order to turn it into this collection of songs and this piece of music is just quite incredible. And, I said it in my Clash review, the biggest takeaway for this project for me is the end result is nothing like anything else I've heard all year. And I'll start with the caveat that, this is an album you have to commit to, you have to invest the time in it. And like I said, I think that context to the project being a book adaptation, to knowing the place that it's about, I think that context is important to how you appreciate the music and how it plays out. But I think with anything that needs, that amount of investment, the rewards you get at the end are just resplendent. I mean, for me, it's not like just another album. It reminds me more of what public service broadcasting have been doing so well, which is taking this source from another medium and transforming it into something completely new. There's also shades of, Nick Cave on here with the some of the orchestral compositions that he's put together in recent years, and the prose-like lyrics that he has in his music. But yeah, it's ultimately, although it's got similarities to those, it's ultimately so unique for me. And it's at the core of it, it's just Hayden playing this conductor role and doing it so masterfully. The propeller ensemble on this album with the wonderful woodwind arrangements. You've got Kerry Andrews, who does the gorgeous like choral work as well. And I've said it before, my favourite records are the ones where, it offers something unique. It's an eclectic listen, but it also has that single narrative that brings that eclecticism all together into a singular project. And I think this ticks every box for me. I won't go through the whole thing, but in terms of highlights, I'll just pick out a couple, because really for me, this is all about experience. It's one of those where it's like, I'm going to experience the whole thing rather than go into the individual pieces if I'm putting it on. But, picking out just a couple, Merman, brilliant opener, that heartbeat like bass that just feels like the sound of Ness coming alive to start the record. And I think I saw Hayden, I read a Clash interview with him today where he referred to it as a Jaws requiem, which I think hits the nail on the head. It's definitely got that Jaws soundtrack feel to it. Very, you've got the contrast of the dark, like ominous electric sound with his pitch perfect vocals, and then the floaty clarinet that comes in. It's just an outstanding mood setter for the whole thing. One of the singles for the project and the closing track to side A, if you're listening on vinyl. I'm just addicted to that song at this point. That chorus melody every time just weaves itself into my head. It's got like the Rolling Stones swagger about it with the the Jag and Haggle of the Gulls.
Yeah, it's Jag and Haggle of the Gulls.
Yeah, it's just such a great line. And it's got some old worldy instruments on there too. There's a sackbut, which is like this old trombone, and a spinet, which is like this older version of piano. And I think that gives it a really unique sound and a unique feel to that song. Then in the back end, my absolute favourite track, V or 5, which is what I should say as well is each of these songs kind of represents a chapter in Robert's book. He's kind of taken those and basically translated them to a song. But V or 5 is like the 5th and final chapter of the Green Chapel narrative that runs through the album. And, with that being the last chapter in the book, it's kind of like on here, it's the grand climax of that, Song of the Bomb narrative that runs through the record. And yeah, it's my favorite moment on here. One of my favorite songs that he's done. Well worth watching the animated video that goes with it. But the song itself, it's got those siren-like electronics. It's a mix of spoken word and these, goosebump-inducing choral harmonies. Again, it's dark, it's ominous, but yeah, just a sensational song. I really love that one. And yeah, I won't go into the others. I love the whole thing, as you can probably tell. But yeah, I could happily talk about the ins and outs of this record for hours, and we don't have that time. So I'll just end by saying this album right here is the reason why Hayden Thorpe is, my favorite artist, because it's something completely out of left field, like compared to his last 2 records as a solo artist, particularly compared to his last record as Wild Beast. If you listen to this, you wouldn't even probably know that it's the same artist that's put them together, just because it's so completely out of left field. It's so different to what he's done before. And yeah, like I said, it's completely different sonically to the 2 solo records that came before it. And he's just an artist who's never playing it safe. His musical ambition truly has no bounds. And yeah, for me, this is a record that it just delivers a must-hear experience like no other. Is how I'd wrap it up.
Nice way to wrap it up as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm very much a fan of Wild Beasts. I was lucky enough to see them on their last show at the Hammersmith Apollo. I think you said in the
I
chat that
was
you were
there,
there as well, so that's funny. We were there for that one, but yeah, I you know, obviously seen him. I was aware that he did Diviner at the time. I think I didn't sort of dive more deeply. I kind of compare it a little bit to like the Maccabees and Orlando Weeks, and I've just at the end of both bands, I've kind of left it there, and not really sort of explored what they're doing by themselves. And this is a perfect illustration of why I should be. Because yeah, I mean, I don't need to add too much. I think everything you said. You've got a 360-degree knowledge by now if you've read the book as well. I haven't read the book, but certainly feel over the last however many weeks very immersed with this album, and very much enjoyed reading about it, including your review, including the Clash interview today, and obviously listening to the podcast you did with Hayden. So yes, I think one of the things I enjoyed so much about Wild Beasts were their lyrics, and just how offbeat and how eloquent they are as well. And clearly he's found a kindred spirit in Robert Macfarlane with, the one lyric I picked up here is the one you actually mentioned, which is, and ever the jag and haggle of the gulls. It just sort of is a real earworm, and it just stays with you. And there's similar, interesting lyrics quite often about birds, and I'd probably understand more through reading it. But I'm kind of happy enough with the album, really. So I mean, in terms of my highlights, Merman was one of mine as well. It was just fine, instantly engaging.
Very Wild Beast, that one as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the most Wild
all
Beast
about
moment.
drift. In there, which I'm sure there's an extra meaning on the drift side of things. Probably a few different ways you could take that, and just saying that it's engrossing and intimate. Probably my favourite is She, which I actually think could just be a standalone single, and is just a real timeless, acoustic track, which to me is Jeff Buckley-esque. It's Nick Drake-esque. You have some backing singers, which just it's just sumptuous. It's just one of those songs, some of the best chilled songs, like Otis Redding sitting on the dock of the bay. That sort of vibe. That's what I get through She, and where I could just sort of luxuriate in it and just sit back and just be completely in bliss in those moments. And then that was another one you mentioned, which has got some kind of electronic bongo percussion, acoustic guitar overlay. So yeah, they're probably my standout tracks. I think a couple of them, as standalone tracks, probably aren't as engaging. I mean, you got the interestingly titled "WTF Is That" second up, which it kind of it maintains that ominous nature of what's begun with Merman. But yeah, I don't think you'd go to that by itself particularly.
There's a few interludes as well that kind of just tie narrative together more than anything, I'd say.
And as you said before, this is one to really take as a whole and just immerse yourself. So yeah, there are a few which are of that ilk, I would say, but the overall experience is just such an engaging listen, such a different album, and it just has that rare ability of an album where it just sucks me in purely and completely, and no doubt will be high up come the end of the year as well. So yes, very pleased to be reintroduced to Hayden Thorpe in his solo artistry. So
Yeah, I mean, if you like She and Closer Away, those kind of tracks, definitely go back to Divider as well. It's just him, his voice, and a piano basically for the whole thing, and it's incredible. Yeah, worth checking out.